What's going on, guys? It's me, Tim, and I am back with another video in my hotel room that I'm staying at while I am speaking at the Photo Cookout Conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So I had some downtime in between different speaking events that I had going on, and I decided to do just some random reviews with you while I'm here. One, for a couple of reasons. It's quiet, right? Like, I have 3 little boys at home. They are amazing little guys, but it makes doing any sort of like video work at home super tough. And I'm only working from the office a couple days a week. And generally when I'm in the office, I try to do actual work while I'm there. So whenever I get the opportunity to get a little video time to kind of record these videos for my YouTube channel, I try and take them. But before we continue about the Leica M240, I need to say thank you to my sponsors of this video, Coyote Provisions. Coyote Provisions is an outdoor company based out of Burlington, Vermont, and they make absolutely rad clothing. And you, if you're watching this video, can get 15% off of your entire order if you use the code TIM15 at checkout. Make sure you check out Coyote Provisions because they make a lot of awesome gear. All right, so the whole point of this video really is I wanted to talk about my main squeeze, the one camera that I use, I should say the one digital camera that I use almost every day, the Leica M240. Now, if you haven't seen my other video on how I actually acquired this camera, I will leave it down in the show notes here below. I've had this camera for a couple of years. I have pretty much used it exclusively as of my everyday walk around lens while I'm shooting my kids. I bring it with me on portrait sessions. I actually bring it with me to weddings. And I know when I have this camera that, generally speaking, I have to slow down with what I'm shooting because it is a manual focus only camera. Now, I still do use an external light meter for all of my stuff, even for my film stuff. It's just something that I've gotten into a habit of doing since I started shooting film, I'd probably say 8 or 9 years ago, as my primary medium of, I should say my primary poison of choice when I photograph weddings and portraits. Now, the light meter in this is great. It's a good light meter. It has several options on it. You can also put it in aperture priority mode. It does have like a little A on top of the button. So that way you're really only changing your aperture, which is on the lens. Now on this, I have my all-time favorite focal length, the 40mm f1.4. This lens is actually made by Voigtlander. I believe Leica also makes a version of this, which I hope to snag up maybe one day soon. But right now, you can get the Voigtlander lens for about $3.99. Magnificent lens. I love the 40mm focal length because I also like 50 and I also like 35, and the 40mm fits like dead smack in the middle of that for obvious reasons. And I feel like you can get close enough for portraits, and you can take a step backwards and shoot group shots as well, or to get more of a scene that you're photographing. Hands down my favorite focal length. I've shared that also on my Contax T2, which is a 38mm focal length. And I also had the 45mm lens on the Contax G2, which is also another video that I did. So yes, I love anything within 40mm, hands down my favorite focal length. So I'm a little obtuse. I know a lot of people like 35 and 24 and 50. I like to snag right in between and shoot 40. Now, when I got this camera, I got it with the EVF as well, which was made by Olympus. I would not recommend using the EVF to shoot with. It really actually slows the camera down. I'm not quite sure why, but you can't take as many photographs with it because you're actually waiting to the EVF to refresh. Now, the good thing about it is you can see exactly what you're shooting before you shoot it, so you can make any sort of adjustments you need with the aperture or with the shutter speed or the ISO beforehand. The other really cool thing about the EVF is that if you like to shoot in square format or in 6:7 format, it also has frame lines for that, so that's kind of cool, I guess. I also love the square format, so that way you can kind of compose your image the way that you want to, but I would not recommend shooting with the EVF if you're shooting anything like fast moving or fast pacing or anything that you're gonna need to take maybe like more than 2 or 3 shots of, just because it takes a while for that EVF to refresh. Now, I bet you're wondering, like, why does it take so long? Well, technically the M240 is the second mirrorless camera ever created. The first was the Leica M9, and then all of the major camera manufacturers started to jump on board shortly after that. Never to the success initially as the Leica M9 and the Leica M240, but eventually, as we all know today in 2020, that everyone's making a great mirrorless camera now. So being the first to the market or being the second to the market, as in the Leica M240, doesn't mean much today because everyone's making a great camera. But what separates this camera from all of the other ones is really the fact that it limits you with what you can do. I mean, and what I mean by limits you, it's manual focus only. Like a lot of those other cameras, you know, they can shoot like, what is it, the Sony A9 can shoot like 40 frames per second, which is great and all if you're shooting like super fast moving things, but I just have never really been in the need to shoot that many frames. You know, and as a full-time wedding photographer, there are times in the day where you're going to need to shoot things that are fast-paced, but you can also nail that with a Leica M240 if you practice at it. Fortunate to have 3 very active boys, so I actually do a lot of zone focusing. And what I mean by zone focusing is I focus for an area that I know that my kids are about to enter into, and when they enter into that area, I then hit the shutter, and I'm almost 9 times out of 10 have them in focus when they hit that area. So the same thing can be said when you're shooting the Leica M240, when you're shooting like the processional, the recessional. If you focus on an area and then you wait for the bride and the groom to reach that certain area, you can almost always nail focus if you're using zone focusing on a manual focus camera. Now, I think a lot of photographers, just over the years, we've gotten really spoiled as autofocus. I'm even using that right now on my Canon EOS R as I record this video, has really kind of like improved so much over the years that really, like, I don't know if there's a lot of people out there that are still manual focusing their cameras, just because the autofocus has gotten so good on every camera. And I know that, you know, there's probably still improvements that they can make, obviously, because Canon has made the A5 and the not the A5, Canon has made the R5 and the R6. Sony has made the A7S III, which is, from what I understand, has like bonkers autofocusing and stuff like that. But like, again, all those things are good. I don't know 100% how much better they can get. So, I mean, I feel just, this is kind of a total off rant from the Leica M240, but I feel as if so many camera manufacturers during a global pandemic are releasing like all of these like amazing new cameras when there's not a ton of work to be shot, and they're great, but I would recommend, if you have the Canon EOS R or the 5D Mark III or the Sony A7 II or S2 or R2 or R3, whatever camera you have, I would recommend you just kind of hanging onto that and shooting that. These cameras will eventually come down as people begin to either resell them or as people realize that they don't have as much work as they used to as a creative. So I'm not going to run out and buy any of those new cameras. I'm perfectly happy shooting my Leica M240 and using my EOS R for video. I just don't feel the need to go out and get the newest and greatest thing. I used to have that feeling several years ago, but I realized all that was doing was cutting into my bottom line. And I know it's funny as I'm talking about this Leica M240 being relevant in 2020. Well, today, let's talk about what you can actually get one of these cameras for. Now, I was very fortunate, as you probably have seen in my other video, where I only picked up this camera for about $400 at a thrift store. Got super lucky. I think if you are going to get them new, they go anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 still, even years after it's been released. And is that worth the price still? I don't know, if I'm being honest with you. I think that the Leica M240 is a great camera. I love the colors that come out of it. I've just recently, Bentosh has these Cascade presets that are really kind of built for Leica profiles. That have really allowed the photos that I've taken with this camera to really shine. I'm going to be doing a different review on that here probably in the next few weeks. But I don't know if you need to run out and buy like an M240 today. I think you could actually probably go out and buy a 5D Classic for like $200 and you can still take wonderful images. I personally don't think there's anything so super unique about shooting a Leica that you need to run out and spend it. But if you are into Leica and you have like a bunch of in-mount lenses like lying around the house from your film days, or if you're still shooting the Leica M6, then the Leica M240 will fit very nicely into your collection and will fit very nicely even if you just want to choose something different to shoot on a wedding day. Like, I feel honestly the fact that I have to slow down when I shoot this camera, that it allows me to kind of see a little differently. It allows me to really kind of make sure that the images that I'm taking are images that I want to take, because I'm not going to be able to burst shoot a bunch of images until I can get like 1 out of 20 of the same style that I like. I just like, my goal anytime that I shoot a photograph of a wedding is really only to come home with about 1,000 digital images. And with those 1,000 digital images, I want to be able to deliver as many as humanly possible. So if I'm shooting 1,000 images, like just this wedding I shot a couple of weeks ago, I'm probably going to deliver 650 out of the 1,000 images that I shot with my Leica M240, which is a pretty good retention rate. I do know a lot of photographers who shoot, oh gosh, like 3,000 or 4,000 images and they deliver 350 to 400 images. And I think that's great if that's your bag of tea. It just isn't for me. So I think that if you wanted to really slow down in your processes on a wedding day or on a portrait shoot, and if you want to take photos with intention, not to say that you can't with the other ones, but this will cause you to slow down and to really think about what you're shooting. So I would highly recommend getting one of these if that's your style of shooting, or if you just need a change of pace. And sometimes, if I'm being honest, like just having new gear or new old gear like the Leica M240 will cause you, just as a creative, to create differently. And sometimes that in itself can be worth running out and buying one of these. Definitely buy them used. You can find them on eBay, you can find them on Craigslist. There's various Facebook groups that you can also find these on. One of the other things that I really like about this camera is really, as you can tell, my screen is kind of busted here, but I'm gonna go ahead and, it's like, it really has like limited button options and they're all extremely straightforward. You know, there's, you know, your live view, your play, your delete, your ISO, your menu, and your set button. Really simplistic things. I know like a lot of, like when I was shooting the Canon, not the Canon, when I was shooting the Sony A7 III, there were just so many customized buttons that you had on the camera that you can kind of schedule things. You really had to work on your muscle memory to be able to figure out where you set everything up at. Again, I'm not speaking bad about Sony. That was just one of the drawbacks. And I will say the menu options inside the Leica are very few. There's not a ton of pages. Like if you were to go into a Sony, that's probably the one thing that I hated the most about shooting any Sony camera, is the menu options were just, oh my gosh, it was appalling. They have to kind of flip through all those menus to find what you're looking for. I really want to tell people that one of the reasons why I love shooting this camera is just really because less is more. I know that sounds weird, but you know, you only really need 4 things to shoot and take a wonderful photograph. You need a black box that doesn't allow light in. You need aperture, your shutter, and ISO or film speed. That's all you really need to be able to take a good photograph. And I guess you also need a good lens. But I guess so that's 5 things. So I think that if you're doing that, then like all the other stuff that Sony has in their menus is just a lot of fluff, and that's a lot of things that you're probably not going to use. So I guess that's one of the brilliant things about the Leica M240, is that it really scales all of that nonsense back, and it really allows you to think differently as you are photographing things, and it really just takes things back to the basics. And I know it's like, why would I spend $2,000 or $3,000 to take things back to the basics? Is because, well, to be honest, it's all you really need. And ultimately, that's why I would recommend this camera, is it's all you really need. You need a camera that you can manual focus, you need your eyesight, and you need to be able to just go out and create. So is the Leica M240 still worth it in 2020? I would say yeah, it is. Every photographer, I feel, should be able to manual focus and hit their shots. You should definitely, like, if you're contemplating Leica, obviously you are if you're watching this video, I would highly recommend this camera. One, because it's cheaper. I know the M10 is like 3 times the price. I think you can get the M10 for like $5,000 to $6,000. You can get this for about $2,000, maybe a little bit cheaper if you kind of search for a really banged up one. But the great thing is Leica's still servicing these cameras. So yeah, I would recommend it.